why are we here? Oh, good question. Why are we here? We're going to talk about, I want to give you the latest quick overview. And the reason why it's quick, I'll explain now. Narcissism, personality disorder, abusive relationships, the effects that go into that, and then tying it into the main theme of the book, which is coming out on the 6th of September. The reason for doing it quickly, a quick overview, is as time moves forward, and I'm thinking about this and I'm working with people and developing concepts, the concepts change. So subjectively for me, I'm like, this is the up-to-date information and you should all know it. It's very narcissistic. We all do this. Solipsistically, I imagine you're all in my headspace. But you yesterday may have watched a video from 2014 where the model's completely different. But in your subjective experience, you're like, Richard, you said this yesterday. The other Richard with the shaved head and the double chin. Hey. I look back on those videos and I'm like, what was I doing? Shave my fucking head. Looks horrible. Does it? Oh, bless. You look lovely, like a happy little Buddha. So you think you know a subject. It's like knowing a film. You know the film, you know the subject, but then when you go back and you rewatch the film or you reread the book, you get something else from it. So most of you in here would have experienced some kind of narcissistic abuse in your lives, I presume, and you're looking to get some insight into why that happened, and then you want to heal and move on. Pretty much. Any of you psychotherapists, counselors? No, okay. So it's really your end users. It's not for someone else, it's for you. The formation of the personality disordered individual that you've been dealing with. Well, let's start from the top. How do you even know you're in an emotionally abusive relationship? Because in order to find me or people like me, you've got to put certain search terms into Google, like, why is my boyfriend horrible prick? Or why is my girlfriend so cruel? Or whatever it is. And then that filters down through to coming across my channel or Sam Backman's channel or whoever. You were in some kind of relationship that left you feeling bewildered, yes? So we agree, hello, come in. Oh, you're so bad. I hope you feel bad. Do you? Oh, good. I will drink your shame. It's beautiful. I love it. Doesn't this remind you of school? You missed the test. We're going to have to do the test again at the end. So you're in a state of bewilderment and confusion, which I think is one of the markers of being in an emotionally abusive relationship. The what the fuck is going on here feeling. Because, you know, to use blunt terms, if my girlfriend hits me in the face and says you're a twat, I can actually go to the police with that and be like, oh, she hit me here, and here's the evidence of it. But I can't go to the police with, oh, my girlfriend makes me feel a constant sense of dread and shame. Because the police will be like, that's fascinating. However, we are rather busy with actual crime. So then bewilderment and then isolation, because who do you talk to about strange feelings of dread and guilt and shame? Who's going to listen to you? How do you even verbalize that? Can you verbalize that? See how isolated, just that, the isolation that it instantly creates, because, well, in my area, yes, I do now have friends who I could go to with that, and they're verbally fluent, intellectually fluent with the concepts, but they're few. They're few. I mean, not everybody has Sam Backman on WhatsApp. Big flex. Sam, I'm feeling down. Can I have a chat? Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Oh, very well. It really, really helps. Really helps, because the guy is like, as I'm describing the problem, he's even 3 steps ahead of where I am. It's enormously reassuring. I don't have to stutter through some stumbling description where I'm trying to pull you into my reality. Come in. There's no need to knock. Hello. No, you're fine. I was late. We were all late. This is life. It's reality. It's unfolding. What have you got in your bag?
An expensive sandwich.
From Paul, it fucking is, yeah. Here is your cheese and ham sandwich. Oh, fuck off. £7.80, please. Robbing bastards. Just because they make it fancy, do you know what I mean? So we're bewildered, we're isolated. Have any of you had the experience of trying to explain it to a mental health professional and they don't get it?
Yeah.
Isn't that fucking horrifying?
I'm paying a lot of money for it too.
You were paying a lot of money for it as well?
Yeah.
That's horrible.
For years.
For years. So you've got this sense, you've actually been abused, you're bewildered, you're isolated, you try and explain it to mental health professionals. I even hired mental health professionals who claimed they were experts on narcissism, who then went on to tell me that what I was describing wasn't narcissistic abuse. One woman who is a narcissistic abuse expert said there's no such thing as gaslighting to my face in a session. I wish I'd flipping...
That is gaslighting.
Correct. That is gaslighting. And so, very distressing. We can all agree. It's not a universe, even though there's an explosion online of people calling each other narcissists, there's not a commensurate explosion of understanding. So you have people like Sam, and then people come to me and they're like, why are you promoting Sam? He's a narcissist, he's a psychopath, and he's evil. Yes, of course he is, and I love him. All the more for that. But I really think without the commensurate explosion in understanding, I think we're just going to make the situation worse because of this isolating and bewildered effect. Having an understanding of the mechanics of what's going on brings a degree of reassurance. We've like my job, his job, our job collectively has to be to make this information available to everybody, because right now there's people not far from here, I'm sure, stuck in emotionally abusive relationships where they're angry, they're depressed, they're on drugs, they're addicted to gambling, so it's their fault. You know what I'm saying? Not the other person's fault, but butter wouldn't melt in their mouths kind of a scenario. You're carrying the weight of it. Is there someone at the door?
Yes.
I can see his eyes are like that. Just come in.
Do you want me to go?
No, it's all right. It's all right. Hi. Come in. No, don't be sorry. I'll make you sorry. That comes later. That's in the second half of the seminar.
I think as well, if I may, that I think that there's a lot of suicides and early deaths from people who are at the receiving end of narcissistic abuse because nobody understands it.
Well, if you look, say, imagine you're me in your little friggin' ivory tower, and you look at like the explosion of mental health issues, and people come to me and they go, well, why don't you talk about anxiety? Why don't you talk about depression? Why don't you talk about suicide? Violence escalating. And I look at this cloud of data and I'm like, well, I don't know what proportion of this is directly related to emotionally abusive relationships. And where do we draw, not to go too philosophical and we've got to bring it back, but just on this brief byway, where do we draw the delineation between interpersonal narcissistic abuse and corporate narcissistic abuse, or medical narcissistic abuse, or societal, cultural, or governmental narcissistic abuse? And we can see. Hello. You're fine. You're forgiven. I thought you had a kettlebell in your hand then. I was like, that is a man committed to fitness. I power walked here with kettlebell in hand. I think that's quite difficult because in a way, there is a kind of a gaslighting that's going on culturally, that's going on collectively, that's generating an awful lot of stress. That stress is manifesting as a greater dependency on alcoholism and an uptick in violence. I'm sure you heard about the recent shooting of a 9-year-old girl in Liverpool. I recently did door work, nightclub security, door work we call it, in Liverpool. I'm saying that for the Americans because a doorman in America is a guy in a top hat who invites you into the hotel. A bouncer. And I can see and feel the difference in climate from the 2000s. It's wild. It's fucking wild right now. And there was violence that was being carried out in front of me that reminded me of door work before there was SIA. We have a license now. Well, there didn't used to be a license. And the kind of violence I saw was pre-licensing days. Gangster culture is beloved People are infatuated with gangster culture. What is that? What is gangster culture? You're effectively deifying and lionizing narcissists and psychopaths. That is the essence of the gangster. We say gangster, but that means a professional criminal. What is a professional criminal? By psychological definition, that's a psychopath. All of our notions, by the way, of what psychopathy are, come from the American penal system. When we say psychopath, you naughty fellow, you'll be given burpees afterwards. But you look like you would enjoy it. So I have to find a different punishment. So that is criminality. So the worship of criminality is the worship of narcissistic psychopathy. These things are now, I used to say that this is probably something that we don't need to be focusing on. Now I would say we have to focus on it to transcend it, to move past it. What we have is a lack of a better philosophy. What we have is a lack of a philosophy. We have no spirituality. We have no religion. We have no interpersonal discipline or social contract. And so what we're slipping into are the worst nightmares of Dostoevsky and Nietzsche that they foresaw when we said, okay, no more God. I'm not a God person, don't worry. This isn't like a conversion session. But as somebody who can think rationally, who's interested in psychology and philosophy, I can look at that and say, yeah, that's a real problem. And they seem to be right. If God's not at the top of everything, if religion isn't at the top of everything, what seems to replace it is us. We put ourselves there. So as a biological being, we may actually have a biological need for a god, goddess, or spirituality in the way that we have a need for sunlight and water. And I have no more dogma than that. I'm not like, you must believe this one or that guy or this, just something. Because if we don't have that at the top, we go at the top. And then you have the deification of humans. Which humans? The apex predators, criminals. So in Liverpool, you know, I love my city, I love where I'm from, but the culture's rotten to the core. Rotten to the fucking core. And you have the same problem in London. The worship of gangsterism, the worship of narcissistic psychopaths. And then we go, oh, why are there so many stabbings? Well, wow, I just couldn't fucking figure out why. That's the new religion. How do you initiate into the new religion? Death. Death. You're nobody unless you've killed someone in this cult. It's a death cult. Or you should have at least beaten somebody into hospital with life-changing injuries. Otherwise, you don't count. You don't count. Do you get that? So like this subject actually, I think, comes back into focus, and I think it broadens out. Where we have to be conscientious is that we as individuals have to transcend it, and that's tough. And so that's part of what we'll be talking about today. Emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, is not physical. If it is physical, that becomes psychopathic abuse. If the police could arrest you for it, that's psychopathic abuse. If I put a gun to your head and say, you're not leaving, I'm a psychopath, I go to prison for that, hopefully. If I don't put a gun to your head, but I say, yeah, you can leave, you know what's going to happen if you do. That's where we move into a different area. Or I erode your will so effectively over time that you lose the will to leave, and I convince you that you want to stay because you enjoy this, because this is who you are, and you're not worth anything better. Ah, yes, let the abusive messages go in deep. It's beautiful. I love it. Everybody's hypnotized. See, I'm in a room of people who've been victimized. Everybody just went like that. Ah, yes. It's like Sam describes it as like a hive mind of artificial intelligence that's all connected like the Borg, and like I just showed up as part of the Borg. Like that. You deserve this pain. Yes, yes, master, we deserve this terrible pain. So, broadly speaking, where does the personality that wants to inflict emotional abuse come from? Sorry about that. English breakfast, they don't agree with me. It's probably, we're going to find in the next 2 years, these are not really personality disorders because they're not permanent, pervasive, and personal. They're actually very context specific, and they're interrelational. We can only define, if you look this is Sam, pointed this out to me recently. If you look at the 9 defining traits for borderline personality disorder, how dare you? And I saw the panic on her face as her handbag fell. She's like, this is going to make a noise. Right in front of him as well. Fuck, he's definitely going to take the piss out of me. Ah! Yes, you were right. Sorry. I'm not the good guy in this scenario. Everybody thinks Sam's the bad one and I'm the good one. We're both bad, just in different ways. So it's interrelational. When you look at the traits, you're a clinician, you want to know whether you're looking at borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. All of it is interrelational. None of it can be defined on an island. Arrogance, the propensity towards deception, to exploit, to be bullying, that's interpersonal. So you need people. Are you vehemently agreeing with me? Or are you going, Stop it immediately. Wait. We'll do from now on, it's hands up only. Otherwise, this becomes a democracy. Disgraceful decadence. I'm the tyrant here. Evil. No, benevolent dictator. So you're going to find over time that the way that this is defined changes. Don't be confused. This doesn't mean that you should be hopeful that the person you're involved with will change. They won't. I'm not offering hope. There's no hopium on sale today. It's just that as it is given, it's a psychiatric definition. We can't escape that. We don't get to define the terms. These are psychiatric terms. They will evolve shortly. These are trauma responses. So what you're looking at is a complex post-traumatic stress disorder that becomes predatory and exploitative to feed different needs between a borderline and a narcissist. 8 times out of 10, they overlap. There's very rarely a pure narcissist. Did you know that? It's one of the most comorbid, it's the most comorbidly diagnosed personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder might not even be a thing. It might be psychopathy. And then we have a cultural filter on what we see when we see a female psychopath or a female narcissist. And we go, oh, she's hysterical. Borderline psychotic. These are culture-bound definitions. You have a child who is raised in a goddamn awful environment, in a godless environment, in a hellscape. And they learn to survive, but they learn with wounds. They learn to get by alongside their woundings and their scars. Broadly speaking, when we say borderline, we are talking about somebody who is actively sexually and physically abused. You came in at a good moment. Hello there. How are you? Hello. Please sit anywhere. You're talking about active abuse. When we think of child abuse, the classic way we think of child abuse, is going to generate what we then call clinically borderline personality disorder. Narcissism is a little trickier because it's more rigid. So you will hear borderlines can recover, borderlines respond well to therapy, borderlines can even recover spontaneously, a certain number of them over time. They just get better. That, by the way, ensures that this is not a personality disorder. That personality disorders don't do that. The narcissist is far more rigid and very stiff, and it's very, very difficult for you to get any kind of feedback past the narcissistic defense. Well, if they have narcissistic personality disorder, you won't get feedback past the narcissistic defense. So if any of you have got a plan in your head to be like, I'm going to ask him if I should take the narcissist to therapy, let me just cut that off at the pass, let that hope die. There's no way that somebody with actual narcissistic personality disorder is really going to authentically open up to a therapist. Never, cannot. They don't have the will for it, they don't have the muscle for it, they can't do it. And if they got halfway there and the therapist said, hey, maybe you should think about this, anything that doesn't align with the grandiose self-image is rejected instantly. They have been doing this from childhood, from infancy, with the passion of someone who believes that if they don't, they will die. You understand? It feels to you experientially like they're gloating and they're happy and they feel good. Yes, they do in that moment, but actually beneath that and beyond it, what came from childhood is the fear of death, total destruction of everything that is, right? It's very strong primal drives that compel them to do this. Well, anything that you've done since you were a baby, you're not, like if you go and talk to a therapist once a week, they ain't gonna do shit. Sorry, like it's just not. In terms of neural conditioning, how could it? How could me having a nice quiet chat with you for 55 minutes then going, it's time please, that's not gonna penetrate. Maybe a brush with death, maybe a full religious revelation or a very powerful psychedelic experience, maybe. But beyond that, it's just not gonna happen. So what was the environment that the narcissist was trying to survive? Objectification, abuse, but abuse that was less direct. Direct abuse, probably going to create borderline personality disorder, intense emotional dysregulation, a very damaged sense of self. Neglect or deification, telling the child that they're wonderful and godlike, that's going to create the narcissistic personality disorder. When you think of the narcissist, imagine something pretty gross. Imagine a dead baby, thank you, Richard, inside of a shell. And on the inside of this egg shell is a mirror, a distorting mirror. There was a child, but the child died. What's the child? The authentic self. The authentic self was there, but what happened? They were suffocated inside of the shell. The outer of the shell was built to defend from negative messaging. The inside of the shell is there to sustain, but it's not real food. So the child dies. What are they living off? Narcissistic supply. What is that? Adulation or fear. That's not real food. Oh, here's my love. They fear me, they love me, they applaud me. And they keep going with this maladaptive strategy until all of the authentic self is dead. When you sit with your partner or your mother or your boss or whatever brought you to this seminar on a Saturday morning, please try to hold that in mind. Because if you try to speak to them as though they are a fully functioning human, you will get very, very frustrated, angry, depressed, and full of despair. You will feel enormous stress in your body that will have physical symptoms in the end. You will develop insomnia, you'll develop digestive problems. I've seen skin problems. I've even got a good number of clients who claim they developed things like POTS. What's the thing you develop that they can't identify, but you become very fatigued? Like chronic fatigue syndrome.
Fibromyalgia?
Yeah, fibromyalgia, ME, these kinds of symptoms. It's almost like the central nervous system shuts down in the face of this enormous stress. So we have a child who is really, really barbarically neglected. That's going to create narcissism. They're adulated, told that they're wonderful, not in a, oh, I love you, you're a good kid way, but like, you're amazing. Mummy loves you when you're brilliant. Mummy doesn't give a fuck about you unless you're making mummy look brilliant. So it's a narcissistic parenting style, or you're a piece of shit, you're worthless, or you're only worth sexually abusing. The only value you have is for sexual abuse. You can see how that in a child would vector into histrionic, right? My value is as a sexual object. Borderline, I have no value, I'm completely worthless. And you can see the somatic narcissist come through there. Like, my value is in my body. The hypersexualization of children obviously does all of this as well. You probably will never know if it's your part. For most of you, is it romantic that brought you here? A romantic partner that brought you here? Okay. If it's romantic or familial, you'll probably never know the truth of the trauma that they went through. They're probably never going to tell you. So I've had people come to seminars, they'll be like, no, my husband's experience as a child was this. And I'm like, were you fucking there? No. Who told you that? My husband. Your husband, the pathological liar? You believe him? He was not spoiled as a child. He told me, so I know. You don't know shit. So this is part of us getting trapped inside of their delusion. So when you're interacting with them, this is a child trapped in pain and in suffering. You might feel sorry for them and think you can rescue them. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's the devil's temptation. That's a sinny sin. There's no salvation. No salvation. Don't drink that because you want to, because that feels good. That feels good. Don't. You are not their savior. You are not Christ. You are not the Virgin. Like, leave it. Save yourself.
Run for your life.
You may. If you interrupt me again, you will need to. I have a bad leg, but I'm surprisingly fast. So, relinquish hope, all who enter here. Please, please, save yourselves, because you got one life, there's not that many good years in it, and this will corrupt the time that you do have. If you refuse this and you remain stubborn and you say, no, I'm different, I'm special, the person in my life is different, I'm special, good luck. You will measure the time you waste in years, not months. Good years, good years. Please don't. Not only that, but when you finish with them, the hooks don't leave you. It's like when the bee leaves a bit of its sting inside of you. It's very hard to get that stuff out. I've got clients who've had the same problems for about 10 years, and they come to the same seminars with the same things. And it's very, very hard for them to accept what needs to be done to get these things out, which we'll come to. So the problem, that's what you've got. You've got a child, extremely traumatized. They have to hurt people to feel okay. They can't help it. Don't feel sorry for them. That's a machine. That's a virus. That's a program that's running. Sympathy isn't going to do shit. It's not going to do a goddamn thing but bind you to them, waste your time, make them sicker. Your compassion makes them sicker. You get that? Your compassion is supply. Your compassion it's never taken sincerely. It's only taken as a sign of weakness and something to be strategized and leveraged against you. There are some sad faces in the room right now. Good, I'm doing my job. Breaking hearts and ruining dreams. They're the worst dreams, though, darlings. You don't want these dreams. They're evil. What does that do long term, whether it's a family member or a romantic partner? It generates an effect in you. We call this complex post-traumatic stress. Effectively, it's secondhand trauma. Their trauma goes into your body. We harmonize with each other. This is a very natural thing to do. All of the good things about human beings and the way we interact are hijacked in these scenarios and turned to evil. Thank you, Satan. So you harmonize with the people around you, physically, psychologically, if you spend a lot of time with somebody. If you're conversing with them regularly, their beliefs become your beliefs. There's a lot of osmosis. Imagine how much osmosis there is if you live with somebody, sleep with them, sleep in the same bed with them, eat with them. You're really, really harmonized with somebody who may have some very, very strange beliefs about the world and about you and about love that they're not sharing with you because you're their target. You're their thing. You're not a person. When it comes to the narcissist, they're never interacting with anything external. They're only interacting with parts of themselves. So you're consumed and you become internalized and you're part of them. With the borderline, you will be pushed and provoked into being their savior because they do take a kind of supply. It's not narcissistic supply. It's not purely narcissistic supply. It's like narcissistic supply with sympathy, narcissistic supply that requires pity as well. Otherwise, they can't, it doesn't go in. They don't enjoy it. And the effects of that on you will be, are you all familiar with CPTSD as a concept? Right. So you're aware that there are little bits and pieces of trauma that start to take place inside of us that generate very, very primal responses because you see this as an existential threat. You experience this as something that could cease your existence. So you go primal. The first one will be freezing. Don't get it twisted. Everybody freezes. Everything freezes first. Everything. In terms of evolution, this was the first response to threat. Freeze. Keep still. When you see, it was my job for a few years, unfortunately, as part of teaching. I taught self-defense professionally for 10 years. And it was part of my daily job was to watch violence play out. Some horrible things that I would be sent and I'd have to analyze and then give back to the people who'd sent it to me. And one of the things that everybody would get frustrated with is they'd see other human beings doing nothing when, for example, somebody is being stabbed. And when you're sat at home and you watch it, you go, I definitely would have done something. I 100% would have run over there and have said, you naughty fellow, and punched him in the jaw. But we forget, like, you walk out of here, you're hungry, you're trying to remember what I said, you want to get lunch with your friend, you're texting, and then your handbag is too heavy and your kind of back hurts, and then you look over and you hear this weird noise and some dude stabbing somebody up. The first thought in your mind is not, let me get in there. Your first thought is, what the fuck? Is that real? Is this a film scene being shot? Am I being pranked? Like, it's a strange, alienating experience. Real world violence creates instant trauma. Have any of you seen it playing out, like real violence close to you? The sound it makes is not what you think it would make. It's not like the movies. The things you see is not the same. And part of you just goes, bad, this bad. And you're filled with dread. And your body will tell you, keep still. Don't fucking move. Because you've got no software for it. If you're not trained for it, why would you be? Like, there's no reason for you to get trained in it. If there's no software for it, your body goes, this is a new experience, it's threatening, keep still. Do you see how this relates to narcissistic abuse? The first time you experience it, she said this to me. I didn't do anything at the time. Why the fuck didn't I say this? Because you froze. You fucking froze. You didn't believe. There was no software there for you to go, she's gaslighting, she's triangulating. There's nothing there. So your whole body and your brain just goes, this is a big threat. I don't know what the fuck this is. Let's keep still. Let's keep still. Further up the line, obviously you're aware there will be a flight response. You'll be tempted to try and run away. You'll develop anxiety. There's a fight response. You can become extraordinarily angry at the drop of a hat. These are all primal responses that none of them is better than the other. People say to me, how do I go to a freeze to a fight response? That's not a good thing. You don't want to have a primal trauma response to a situation. And then you have Pete Walker's concept, which is further up the evolutionary scale, which is fawning. Most of you in here will have a very pronounced fawn response. Possibly for some of you, even you being here is a fawn response, because some of you are still in the relationship and you're hoping you can learn something that will save it. You can't. You won't. You're the one who's trying to responsibly fix things. You're the one who's going to therapy. You're the one who's trying to make things okay. It just doesn't work like that. Adult relationships don't work like that. There's another way of approaching this. I've thought about doing it, which is running a course teaching people how adult relationships work, because a lot of people I think are losing it. It was Sam that pointed this out to me. A lot of sexual romantic relationships now, people can spend the first year arguing over what a boundary is, or arguing over what cheating is. That's cheating. No, that's not cheating. Well, my friend says it's cheating. Well, he's wrong. Like, we don't have a unified script of what appropriate behavior between adults is. That's a real problem, you know. That's a big fucking problem, because in those gaps, narcissists flourish. I could just be like, it's not normal for you down here in London, but up in Liverpool, I assure you, every man has 3 girlfriends. You didn't know that? Don't be culturally ignorant. That's very ethnocentric of you. You should respect my Liverpool culture. It is normal, by the way. 3 birds is absolutely standard. It's standard, isn't it, Jacob? Standard, lad. So there's a lot of that takes place. Have you ever heard me say that most narcissistic relationships that people come to me for are cross-cultural? Have you ever heard me say that? Oh shit, I was scared of saying it for years. I don't give a fuck now. Most of my clients, there's either a big gap in age, a big gap in culture, there's an ethnic gap, a language gap. That is the norm in narcissistically abusive relationships. So back when I was more PC and more polite, I wouldn't ask, you see. I wouldn't ask. And now I'm like, okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. You're telling me the relationship has played out like this. It escalated really, really quickly. A lot of big promises were made. There was a whirlwind romance. Where's your boyfriend from? And is he from the same culture as you? Where's your new girlfriend from? And is she from, do they speak the same language as a first language? No. Okay, that's a fucking surprise, isn't it? The opportunity that it provides to blame things on the culture, again, because of the lack of a unified script, allows narcissism to flourish. So let's think of this another way. I was recently in Romania, and they have this strange museum. It's an outdoor museum in Romania. They built it in 1938, where they took all of the different styles of village in Romania and put them in one place. So you could walk into a house that's like a Transylvanian house or a Ukrainian style house and check it out. And I was like, oh, that's inspiring, that. So I did a seminar, and I was like, could you imagine if we all were from a Romanian village, the same Romanian village, and there wasn't much more than the people in this room, there was just children. So there was this number of people, like I'm the baker, you're the doctor, you're the, right? We all have a role, we all know each other. Do you think narcissism would flourish in a village like that? We got one church, one God, one priest, one book, one set of rules. We all know each other by name. We're all a little bit inbred. We're not a pretty people. No, Romanians are beautiful. Romanians are beautiful, I'm joking. But inbreeding's bad. So it's important to say that. So would narcissism flourish in that culture? Okay, well, how do we define what narcissism is? It's abuse, it's exploitation. Does abuse and exploitation flourish in that culture? How the fuck would it? How would it? I saw you stealing. I know you hit your wife. I know you shagged behind your husband's back. I saw you do it. We all saw you do it. How's that going to work? It can't. This is an interrelational phenomena. This is a cultural phenomena that's playing out. And we live in a culture of absolute moral depravity. Absolute fucking degeneracy. So people are coming to me going, why is this happening? I'm like, I don't know. Couldn't be the Kardashians' fault. Couldn't be the fact everybody just sat around wanking themselves sideways and watching shite on Netflix about people taking drugs and murdering each other. Listen, I like gangster movies. I like gangster music. It's great. But I don't live that. I'm not like, this is real. This is how I should live. I want to listen to 50 Cent and be like, now I shall live the way he did when he was selling crack. Fucking hell. But think how juvenile that is. Narcissism is impressionable. It's infantile. So for the people in here, it is funny what I just said, but take it a little literally. They actually think that way. They absorb personalities from films they've seen. They absorb a mode of life from music they're listening to. To you, it's funny. To me, it's funny, but it's real. That's happening. That's happening right now. You go, this is an instruction manual for how I should live. And then I've had this, I was a big 50 Cent fan for years, and I was like, I remember saying to people, even 50 Cent doesn't live like that. Like, that's a character. That's a fucking character to sell to people. You think that that's a mode of living? So in this state of total moral degeneracy and late stage consumer capitalism that we're surviving, we can expect this to flourish if there is no pushback. This shouldn't be relegated to mental health. This shouldn't be relegated to, there's a mental health issue, or there's an individual psychology issue. This is a societal and cultural issue, and it's going nowhere. It's going to get worse unless we push back. I don't have the Church of Richard Grannon, like we should all do. I don't have that. But what I can say is somebody's going to be in charge. Somebody's going to determine the way our lives are lived. And if it's not us, it's probably going to be a criminal psychopath. It's going to be an advertiser. It's going to be a politician. It's going to be some corporate lunatic. And you've seen, I'm sure, we can all agree, whatever your politics are, in the last 10 years, what is normal has changed a lot, right? We're sliding a little bit. We're moving into very strange areas. We're having weird debates about things that you wouldn't even argue about that 10 years ago. 10 years is nothing. 10 years is nothing. That's like yesterday. Culturally, historically speaking, the changes are very, very rapid. So what this generates in us, we have as I said, the freeze, the fight, the flight, and then the fawn response. Most of you in here will be fawn responders. How many of you would identify as being codependent?
Recovering codependent.
I'm not sure what codependent
This is defiant responses. I love it. It's perfect. So what happens when we've been in a narcissistically abusive relationship for a period of time is we start to develop narcissistic defences. You're all familiar with that, right? Let me stand up because there's some people who can't see me. Isn't that better? I could see you, you could see me. I couldn't see you. I was upset for you. Were you upset for yourself? You didn't give a shit? Fair enough. Because I don't want to see you. Sit down, you fuck. Sorry, my leg is really bad. So you've got an effect where you become defiant. You become stubborn in the way that the narcissist was. In terms of recovery, my Are any of you in like recovery at the moment? Are you trying to recover from narcissistic abusive relationship?
I think I've recovered.
You think you've recovered? That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. My advice to you would be apply as much humility as you can to the wound. Don't be defiant. Don't say, this didn't really hurt. Don't say it wasn't really an abusive relationship. Or, yeah, it was a narcissistic abusive relationship, but I showed him. You didn't show him. You didn't show him shit. You didn't. It doesn't work like that. Be humble. Just accept it. Just say, okay, I lost. This hurt. This is not the relationship I would have gotten into if I'd known what I was getting into. You got tricked. You were duped. And then you got ripped off. It sucks. But if you can admit that, you're not engaging in narcissistic defiance, because the narcissistic defense is to say, no, it didn't hurt. No, that didn't happen and I'm okay. That's the narcissist in you. That's the side of you that's been inflamed and that's been provoked. If that continues to live on, you really can't recover. You can never fully recover unless you take that humility and say, okay, I really, really screwed up. As far as the trauma responses go, do you all understand the trauma responses that we just went through? Okay. There's the fawn one is probably the most important one in terms of understanding where we're up to and why this is so difficult to recover from. In the book that I've written, I propose an idea of codependency. You said you're not sure if you're a codependent. There's an idea of codependency I'm calling echo codependency. So this is not the opposite, it's the inverse of a narcissist. So where the narcissist is rigidly yang and stuck on transmit and completely in love with themselves and wants to be the ultimate predator and the most beautiful, the most special, the most whatever, Narcissus was a male. He was a hunter. He was he's described as a beautiful boy, a beautiful Greek boy in Ovid. And he falls in love with himself. He falls in love with his own reflection. We all know that, but most of us aren't familiar with the echo part of the story. She was a nymph. She was a very, very talkative nymph, and she pissed off the mother of all the goddesses because she helped the husband of the mother of all the goddesses shag in the woods. She stopped. The mother of the goddesses came and said, "Where's Zeus? Where is he?" And Echo said, "Oh, he's not here. You know, I think he was here, but he's gone over there," and confused her while Zeus was getting it on. So she was like, "Right, you cheeky little bastard. You're not going to be able to speak." She could sing beautifully, she spoke beautifully, and she spoke a lot. So the punishment was, you will never speak again, except to be able to speak the last 3 words that somebody else has said. That's Echo's punishment. Echo then is completely, so we have toxic yang, rigidly in love with its own image and stuck on transmit. This is who I am, I'm beautiful, and it's perpetual, it's eternal. Nothing penetrates that. Then you have toxically yin. You know, yang and yin, they're generally the masculine, feminine polarities. Toxically yin, no will, a complete fucking drip, a total walkover, no voice of her own, no will of her own. She can only repeat that which is given to her. So she is just an echo. The original title of the book was Just an Echo. She can only echo what other people have said. There's a whole interaction between Narcissus and Echo, which she confuses. She calls, he is her, she's stalking him in the woods, and he says something like, "Who goes there?" And she can only reply, "Goes there." There's an interaction that goes on between them. This is really important. She mistakes it for a sign of love. She mistakes what he's doing as a sign of love. It's a miscommunication between Echo and Narcissus. And because of that, she thinks that he is in love with her. He is in love with himself. Does this metaphor work for you? It's a miscommunication. You thought that person loved you. They were you were just an extension of themselves. Echo codependency then, because you know codependent is not a clinical term. It's from Alcoholics Anonymous, and then it's kicked around on internet forums. People like me use it. It's not, a clinician can't say you have codependency. They can say you have dependent personality disorder. So it's ill-defined. So in this definition, what I'm saying is a person who's had their will carved out of them, taken from them, usually from childhood experiences, usually from highly narcissistic parents. In echo codependency, we must find someone to fill the space. So we're an empty cup. So if you're into your hermetic magic and tarot, yang is wands, it's a phallic symbol, and yin is cups. It's the opposite symbol. So we're that empty cup. There's no substance there. We have no form. We have no will. That's the real problem. It's not that narcissists are narcissists. It's that we are too weak to say no. We're too weak to stop them, culturally and individually. So culturally, it's the same thing. The fact that there's narcissists and psychopaths is meaningless. There's always been narcissists and psychopaths. It's that we're in a cultural place where we're so weak, we just let them do what they do. Hello.
Sorry.
You're all right. Come and take a seat, mate. You're just in time for a break. So that's the echo codependency definition I've given. The reason why I've given it is because it has a solution written into the source code. So the solution there is you must reclaim your will. You must find your voice. You have to start saying no. There are things that have happened in your narcissistically abusive relationships that you didn't say no to, that you could have done, that you should have done. So it's not, I want to try and remove some of the complexity to all this. It doesn't matter whether your partner was a psychopath, a borderline, or a histrionic. Nobody's ever really going to know. And it doesn't really matter too much exactly how the abuse played out, as long as you can understand that it wasn't your fault. They were always going to do that. You were incidental. You're a thing. You are a thing. You're a thing that was used for a period of time. You were a mirror. You were useful, and then perhaps you ceased to be useful. We're bringing romance. We're bringing, like, when she said on August the 26th, what did that mean? It didn't fucking mean anything. It meant stay and do your job. That's it. You want to know what the communication boils down to? Stay and do your fucking job. Because if you don't, I'll fire you and I'll get someone else. I'm the director of the movie. You're the actor. Do your job or else. There's no other communication. There's nothing else. Well, it's so confusing. It ain't. It ain't. It just hurts. So you pretend it's confusing because you don't want to hear that. You're like, oh no, I have to think about this. And like, maybe the meaning is, no, it's just do your job. Do your job. You have a role, fulfill it or go away. We're going to take a little break and then we'll come back and everything is going to be okay. I hope. Take like 5 minutes and then come back in, please, folks. Thank you. Welcome back. How are you? Yeah. Pain is fleeting, momentary. Folly. I really shouldn't run on this fucking thing. It really doesn't want to be run upon. You know what they told me to do? The physio said I have to do yoga and go on a bike. I hate those bicycles where you pedal them and they go nowhere. Very, very angering to me on a deep level. Hello. Did he tell you where the water was? She did. She gives good advice, he gives terrible advice. He'll tell you anything. Just go over there, away from me, and ask someone else. As long as it's not my problem. No, I'm sure he's a lovely chap, Mr. Hairband. So, bless you, alhamdulillah. Does anybody have any questions on anything that we covered in the last section? Is everybody back?
Oh, I've got a question.
Okay, you?
I've written it down, sorry.
If a narcissist has a breakdown and then they see a therapist,
Yeah.
actually, I would say I'm pretty confident that if they have a breakdown and see a therapist,
Yeah.
of their own violation.
Yeah, violation, good.
Sorry.
You're-
Only if
you're
it's
okay.
of their own violation.
Violation.
That they can.
That right there is a violation of the English language. Volition.
Volition, sorry. Then they can recover. But it has to be probably a breakdown and then going on their own volition.
Do you have a question?
No, I've answered it, sorry. I was thinking about it and then I thought...
Do you have any further statements to make?
It's because I had very strong narcissistic traits, but I didn't know I did until I had a breakdown and then it changed my worldview.
Yeah. Did you have narcissistic personality disorder?
I was never formally diagnosed with that. So
Do you think you did?
No, I think I just had
So it's a
traits.
different thing.
I think I just had traits.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, I pointed at you.
So that's okay. So I understood you to say earlier that the children of psychopaths are likely to be borderline. Did I understand that correctly?
Did I say that?
Did I? I don't know. Did
No,
you?
no, I didn't.
You didn't.
No.
My question is.
The voices in your head said
that one.
Richard said. Go on.
So the children of NPD, are they likely to have a particular personality problem, whether it's dependent personality disorder or NPD or borderline?
Yeah.
What can you be looking out for?
It can depend on a lot of things like birth order. It can depend on how they're treated within the family unit. A lot of people in this room right now were raised with parents that were with highly narcissistic traits. So dependent personality disorder, possibly. What I'm calling codependency is a more of a general hyper-pronounced fawning response, becoming excessively agreeable, becoming echo, empty, waiting to be filled with somebody else's ideology, or Satan's dong.
And I've got a follow-on question.
I got away with saying that and nobody heard me. Go on. I could put Satan's dong in people's ears. They don't even flinch now. That's how abused my followers are. Satan's dong, he said it.
You mentioned dependent personality disorder. I've never heard that before.
Yep. What are you reading from?
My notes.
It looks like
on
a
the back.
baker's.
I forgot
Okay.
paper and pen, stupid
You can
thing.
have one more
It's my
question. You can have one more
appetite.
question because there's a gentleman up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I've never heard of dependent personality disorder. My understanding of codependency is not a permanent pervasive personality disorder that you can heal from it, but dependent personality disorder sounds like it is permanent and pervasive.
And personal, because
And
it's a personality disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it is.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Could you say a little bit more about why defiance is not like a healthy response? I first thought maybe, can that energy to, fight for yourself or want to, not be abused, can it be a good thing? Or?
I think the desire to fight back and to resist oppression and evil is good. If it's delusional, it's problematic. It becomes an issue. So if it's a knee-jerk response, it's neurotic, it's thoughtless, there's no consciousness there, it's just, I'm doing this because I say no to everything. I think in psychology where we use defiance, it's probably a little different. Wasn't there a film called Defiance? You guys see that film? Daniel Craig out in the woods, they were resisting the Nazis, right? There was a real story of Jewish brothers who saved Jews in the World War II, Defiance. So yeah, I think in psychology when they say defiance, it's implicit that there's a neurotic element to it, which is why we have oppositional defiant disorder. If you're actually defying evil, and of course morally, yeah, that's good. You're resisting evil. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Yes, madam.
Why do we become codependent?
By my model of codependency, if we become codependent in childhood, it's because of having excessively demanding, rigidly narcissistic parents who really didn't want, can I say you? I mean everyone, but I'm going to say you. They didn't want you. They didn't want you as a child. They wanted a thing that benefited them. And when the child comes along, children are complicated. They have many needs. Their needs can often be contradictory. And they are hard work. And some parents can't offer the psychological, emotional energy to meet those needs at a good enough level. And so the child is aware, not consciously, but on some level, that they're not really wanted and they're not really loved. So they're not really being given the thing that they need in order to thrive and to flourish. Your model for loving yourself is modeled after how your parents loved you. So if your parents loved you in a dismissive way, in a resentful way, if they gave you tiny bits of love, when they had the time to deal with your nonsense, then that's how you love yourself. And you go, well, I'm full of nonsense and I'm annoying and I'm not really welcome and I'm, right? So these are the kinds of beliefs that codependents walk around with, the sense that they're not good enough when they just show up as themselves. So they have to be something else. That's just a bog standard codependent, a normal codependent. With echo codependency, I'd take it further and I'd say that the abuse, so that's like neglectful parenting. They just can't really be asked to be a parent. And we all see that. Like, you have friends probably who you can see this with. I have friends. They're doing their job. Like, the child is alive and basically clean and with some food inside of it, but they're not parenting. They're not parenting. They don't understand what parenting is, and they're not naturally adapting to it. Then there's the predatory style of parenting where they're actually abusing you. They're actually taking from you. They're actually drinking your milkshake. So what I would, to stretch my metaphor, and because I like Taoism, I like the yin-yang model, the ultimate narcissist is the most visible. They desire to be the most seen. So yang in the Taoist system is the sun. So they are in the sun, they are in the light, and they are seen. Yin is cave, yin is inward, yin is home. So the codependent goes inward. They sink into themselves, they sink into the darkness of themselves, and they seek to eradicate themselves. A true echo codependent, my model, this is just my thing, self-eradicates. They deliberately, to use Freudian terms, castrate themselves. There's no libidinous energy that can be permitted here, because libidinous, passionate, virile expressions of who I am as a little boy or a little girl were punished. So I said, okay, fuck it then, I'll mutilate myself. I will cease to be. I will haunt my own life. So if you take the physical metaphor, imagine there's a cave, and then outside the cave is the sun. You said, why do children, well, you asked what would happen with kids, and we said birth order or the way they're treated. So some kids will go narcissistic, some kids will become borderline, some will become echo codependents. There's a child that got a kind of abuse that was rewarding. There was adulation there. Well done, you're very clever. You make daddy look clever. I get narcissistic supply vicariously through you. You go in the sun and you become the apex of whatever, the apex piano player, the apex brilliant little 10-year-old physician or mathematician or whatever you are as a gifted child in this scenario. The other child doesn't want the sun, because when they're seen, they're punished. So they seek to not be seen. They seek to hide. So they go inward. They go into a cave. What they leave outside the cave is the false self. So when you interact with a codependent, a true echo codependent, you're interacting with a false self, just like the narcissist false self. It's a scarecrow. It's an effigy. I leave an effigy outside the cave to be destroyed. So if the predator does come, they can eat, but they don't eat me. Inside the cave I go. Now, depending on where I am on the spectrum of echo codependency, I might just be inside the cave, but I'm still a person, and maybe you can lure me out in a loving relationship, or in the therapist's office, I come out. But in really, really strong, highly traumatized, highly tortured people, they shrink back into the cave and then they invisibilize themselves and they disappear, because the predator keeps coming in. They can never escape the pain. They can never escape the torture. So they completely eradicate themselves. So some of the people in this room are on a different scale of echo codependency to where I would be or where you would be. So bringing them, healing that is difficult. We all have to live in the light. We all have to be visible. Otherwise you're not living. You can't live in the dark. That's just not it. I mean, you can, but you effectively are haunting your own life. So you have to show up, you have to be visible, and that requires courage and vulnerability. How do I get somebody who's eradicated themselves to go outside if there's no self to go outside with? You have to it's almost like some magical, mystical process. I have to resummon the self because they eradicated it. So how do I bring that back? So when we're talking about codependency, it's a little bit of a complicated issue, and it can be the result of very, very serious trauma over a long period of time. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes?
I had a question about, you said how it's difficult between two different cultures. What's your experience with people who have dual heritage, people who have two cultures?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that from your experience of trying?
They're all mad as a box of frogs, aren't they? They're just fucking mad. I have two cultures. I was raised in Portugal, and I spoke to Isabel about this a few times. My British cultural conditioning is broken. So there's things that British people like that fucking making me mad. I get really angry with them. I get very frustrated with British culture generally. I think it's backward and regressive and stuck in 1945. Especially our cuisine. Fucking hell, the food we eat. It's not even food. I wouldn't give it to a dog. I honestly wouldn't give it to a dog. It's disgusting. The things that we do for fun, to me, are completely insane. I'm not dual heritage. I don't have two passports, but I was raised in Portugal in formative years. I spoke Portuguese. I have Portuguese friends. This is not modern day Portugal. This is 1980s Portugal. It wasn't developed like it is today, and so that itself brings a whole other set of issues. So coming back to this country, I kind of came back to this country as the immigrant with the chip on the shoulder. So I've got a chip on my shoulder to this day, a little bit. I'm also confused about where I stand, and I'm confused about, like, obviously I don't fit in Portugal, and I don't fit here, so I'm outside. So that makes me vulnerable to narcissistic abuse. But I have seen other immigrants, close friends of mine, develop into full-blown narcissists as a direct result of their dual heritage. So there are two responses, which is interesting because my view of narcissistic personality development is through two poles, is through two pillars. Are you dual heritage?
Yes, and I studied it as well.
You studied dual heritage? Oh, you've done research on it? That's cool. In psychology or sociology?
In psychology.
Oh yeah. What did you find? They're mad as a box of
I didn't want
frogs.
to present my findings.
You didn't?
I quit research.
Why? Why?
Because I didn't want it to be used. Like, I felt like it was my people, and I was like kind of being made to prove that dual heritage people are definitely going to have problems or have adjustment issues and be like not developed properly.
Okay. Did you find any correlation, or did you check for prevalence of narcissism amongst immigrants?
No, just identity adjustments mainly.
Identity adjustments.
Yeah. Which is essentially bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't looking for personality disorders. You were looking for identity adjustments. Yeah, and narcissistic personality disorder is an identity adjustment. I released a video on it years ago. Again, I'm not as fussed these days about being politically correct as I used to be, because I'm fucked anyway. Like, I might as well just say what I think. I know that I don't just think. I know it's a problem in these communities because I've lived. Because I couldn't fit into my own community, I'd end up like I was in the British Chinese community for years, integrated to the point where I spoke Cantonese. So I'm on the inside. I know how they think and feel and how they operate and their sense of where they are in the culture. And of course, narcissism is a defense to being, well, like, that's a whole other, you know, yes, it's a difficult conversation to have because I'm not Chinese, so I don't want to say, but like, there's an experience that they have subjectively that leads to a coping mechanism, a coping strategy. What is it? Yes, sometimes it absolutely is going to be narcissistic personality disorder. My two best friends growing up, sadly, became very, very, very sick, and they were very similar. One was from Bangladesh, the other is from Hong Kong. And where I'm from is white, super white. When we were growing up, it was 99% white. The Wirral is a peninsula. It's not like Liverpool. The Liverpool's a port, and it's had integration for a long time, but we are a white peninsula. And so they were raised in an environment where there was both abuse and adulation. So they were special. One was intellectually very special, extremely erudite, way better English than I've got. And the other one is an athlete to this day. So there's somatic narcissism and cerebral narcissism there. There was neglect, there was abuse, there was open racism, and then they were always special, always. Because they always stood out, like visually, like instantly they were special. And then when they went back to their own communities and had to marry, they couldn't integrate because they ceased to be special. They went invisible again. So their responses were very interesting. Like they had to find other maladaptive ways of, they need that. So they've got to go to other environments, and then they ended up with people from different cultures so that they could get back to, it's it's a tricky subject. It's a difficult, I don't know, the whole thing is difficult. You have to be brazen like me and not really care that much, because at this point I'm like, like what's going to happen? Who knows what could happen? But it's a very, very interesting subject. It raises the issue of the two polarities. My original suspicion, I got this from watching a documentary about Russell Brand, between his two parents. Like, his mother was very loving in a very cloying way. I don't know him, so don't take this seriously. I just saw it in this way in this documentary, which could have been edited in a funny way. Who knows? His father is a philanderer. He wrote about this in his autobiography. He wasn't around. Was a philanderer, chasing women all the time, and ignored him as a kid. So you've got like the archetype of a dismissive father who's highly narcissistic. And there's interactions, they call it in the documentary, where Russell would start to speak and his father would start talking about something else. He'd cut him off and just talk about something else. And Russell was visibly saddened by this. He goes back to his mum, and his mum still treats him like he's 5. And what I started to see was like, oh, his mother feels guilty because she married a bellend. And his dad is not a nice, well, the documentary makes him seem like not a nice man. So I was like, there's the polarity. You've got a completely dismissive parent. There's one pole that says you're a piece of shit. So if you're in an environment, you're experiencing racism, what's the superego injunction? You are a bad object. Essence. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do. You're a bad object. What's the other polarity? Oh, sorry, you are the worst object. So make it extreme. So in one polarity, you're the worst object. You're demonic, evil. And in the other polarity, mummy comes along and says, oh, I'll save him. You're an angel. You're perfect. You're wonderful. You're the best object. Now, what's wrong with these injunctions? They're delusional. They're both false. There's both nonsense. You're not a bad object. You're not the worst object. And you're not the best object. You're a person. This causes a fracture because it fractures reality. You're now being given information that's it's delusional thinking, but it splits. A poor child is being pulled between these two poles, and the child will make a choice. Am I the bad object or am I a good object? Probably with borderline personality disorder, they can never escape the bad object superego injunction. They just don't have the strength, or they don't have the defiance, or whatever it is. So they maintain the bad object. When I use this language, you know what I mean? Bad object, I just feel like a piece of shit. I've been told I'm a piece of shit, I feel I am. Good object, I'm wonderful, I'm the best thing. And it splits them, pulls them in 2 different directions, and it splits them. So that's 2 parents. Well, cultures are parents, countries are parents. Which is my mother country? Is it Portugal? No, I wasn't born there. It's not my first language. Is it the UK? I fucking hope not. Would you like some tea and biscuits? Shove them up your arse.
Tea and biscuits.
Yeah. You love tea and biscuits? Yeah. No, you should do. It's right. You should love tea and biscuits, tradition, the royals, and disappointment in equal measure. You just love it here. And football and warm beer. Ah, fantastic. So when we're recovering from these scenarios, because there is an element of trauma, real trauma to these scenarios, real PTSD, we have to realize how these things are playing out in order to recover from them fully. How many of you would say that you're emotionally dysregulated? I thought you were putting up 2 hands. Jacob's like, fucking me. Me. It's just stretching. There's more emotional dysregulation in the room than you guys are aware of. Not everybody who's emotionally dysregulated put their hands up, because it's normalized for you. You don't realize the amount of anxiety and commensurate dissociation and depression that you're feeling, that I'm watching you cycle through in the first 15 minutes of doing the talk, is emotional dysregulation. This is not a criticism. Don't feel bad. That's hopeful. That means you could actually re-regulate. You don't have to feel as bad as you feel. You don't know that you feel bad because you always felt this way. Does that make sense? So some of you are really struggling quite a lot. And you don't have to, but you're being tough. You're like, no, I'm okay. I'm all right. This is how life is. It actually isn't. Like, people who weren't raised in very, very difficult, demanding environments don't cycle through this many emotions this quickly. To be cycling through this, just cycling through emotions this quickly, is very tiring. It's a stress for your body. When you cycle through emotions that are intense, your perceptions change. When your perceptions change, if the emotion experienced in the body is intense enough, your whole view of reality changes with it. So if you're in a highly pronounced fight response, you're going to be in a different mindset, belief system reality than if you're a highly pronounced fawn response. Your politics will change, your beliefs about life will change, your spirituality will change. It's very, very hard for very emotionally dysregulated people to have a fixed set of values, if that makes sense. Because you don't have a fixed set of values, because you're trapped between two poles, or you're trapped between, what did you call it? Dual culture? Dual heritage, yeah. Why do you say heritage instead of culture? Is it more PC?
It's my supervisor.
That's your supervisor? Yeah. I've heard that, and I'm like, oh, okay. Heritage sounds nice. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. Like, I'm House Stark.
Like heritage is more personal to the self, and it's more also potentially like your psychology and your development,
Yeah.
whereas culture belongs to others. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It sounds kind of PC, but it's like, it's one of those times where I'm like, no, actually, that just sounds more, not just politically correct, but factually correct.
Like culture is the group, heritage is the individual.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. So, I'm spinning off on that. What was I saying? You know, when I was a kid, I took acid quite a lot.
Dysregulation.
Yeah, man. Some people are like mammals, they're like cat people. And then there's some people, they're reptiles. And they're from the planet, the wrong seminar. It's the wrong. I used to see that when I took acid. I'd be like watching people, I'd be like, I can see their DNA. They're part of the evil lizard race of narcissists and psychopaths. Off my box once and I had to go home.
Sorry, emotional dysregulation you were talking about.
Emotional dysregulation, leave that. I saw Clint Eastwood doing Dirty Harry and I was flying on acid. I was peaking on acid and I was like, why is there so much aggression? What's he doing? Like, Dirty Harry is an angry man running around with a huge fucking gun. Like, when you're on acid and you look at that, you're like, what the fuck is this? How's this entertainment? This is madness. He's clearly the king of the lizards. Emotional dysregulation and acid will change your perceptions. So that means that if you're already emotionally, like, how many of you would say that you already were emotionally dysregulated before the abusive relationship? Okay, so there was codependency issues from childhood anyway, a little bit. It's not necessary that you already have pre-existing issues, but it helps me to abuse you if you do. It helps me because you're already primed for obedience in the face of tyranny. You're already ready to be enslaved, to be abused, to be instrumentalized. If you've never experienced that before, I have to get a stronger hold on you. Do you mind if I ask how many of you didn't have problems before you were in a narcissistically abusive relationship? Could you just give it to go like this? No problems at all. Just two of you. Did you have any problems before the abusive relationship? A little bit? You were in a foreign country though, right? Another little pet theory of mine, because this thing with the cultural thing that we spoke about, I only have anecdotal. I don't have good data for that, only my own experience. When people move to new cities and new countries, they become vulnerable. I think it's the isolation can be a big, big factor. There must be some big leverage. And they spat on you then, sorry, it happens. You did sit near the front door. There needs to be some sort of a hold, because why else would you stick around? Why would you put up with that? So either there's like death of a family member, so you're already feeling grief. You've moved to a new city or a new country, so you're on your own. Usually something. If somebody's strong, they have a community, they have their family and they're feeling good, it would be pretty hard for me to lure you into an abusive relationship. Do you know what I mean? Like in your own time, you don't have to, it's not a group therapy session. We're not Americans here. In your own time, just think it through. Think back to what happened in the week or the month before the abusive relationship started. You'll probably see life was a bit chaotic. You weren't really feeling yourself. You weren't really feeling that good. and they just seemed amazing. Unfortunately, they probably saw that in you, like I can see it in you, because I have highly psychopathic traits. I'm very predatory. Oh, the abuse hasn't even begun yet. It's actually not that hard to see when people are struggling. You can see when people, because you think, well, I'm just sat here looking at you, but you're not. Some of you every 30 seconds are looking off like this. Sad, watery eyes. And I'm like, I think they're sad because I'm an empath and I can feel. I'm attuned. No, I can tell you're sad because you've got a sad face. Like, you're sad, your face just goes sad for a minute. You'll laugh and you're like, that was a funny joke. But it hurts. And if I can see it, they can see it. And you probably could see it as well, but you're not mad. You're not trained to do, you don't look for vulnerabilities in people. You don't do it. But if you did, you would probably see it. So my suspicion is, like, for those of you who weren't raised in codependent environments, something put you into an emotional state that made you vulnerable. That person saw it and they swam right in. They're like, this one will do. This one's ready. This one's pre-cooked. Because I don't want to fight you. I haven't got time to fight with you. Like, what's the point? I'll take easy prey. I think all predators do that. No predators are like, oh, let's have a fight. Let's deal with somebody who's really healthy and gonna, kick me in the face whilst I'm trying to eat them. No, you go for somebody who's a bit tired, bit sick, not feeling that good. They've drifted away from the rest of the herd. This is why communities are so important. And this is why I'm very, very worried about the state of culture. You'll hear me bang on about culture these days. It makes everybody very, very vulnerable, because if you're on your own, that dysregulates your perceptions. I'm coming back to the perception issue for a reason, which is I don't think any of you would get into an abusive relationship if your perceptions were not warped. And if you were in an abusive relationship, if your perceptions were not warped, you would see it and you would walk away. But you're here, remember we said at the beginning, because of the experience of bewilderment. You can't tell what's abuse. You don't really know. Was he being abusive when he said that? Well, he does have abandonment issues with his mum. And then you become your partner's psychologist and start making up reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. Two things let's do three. Okay. You must emotionally re-regulate. Everybody who's looking at me right now would benefit from a bit of work on this. Physiological and emotional regulation. So you feel safe. You have to feel safe inside of your own body to feel safe in the world. You don't. Like most, I would say like 90% of the people here right now, you don't. You're cycling through too many emotions. Becoming emotionally re-regulated means you've got to get in touch with your emotions. Don't be scared of your feelings. They're not going to drown you. They're not going to destroy you. They're just messengers. And if you take the messages that they give you and listen to them, assume that they have a positive intent. Fear, rage, jealousy, whatever it is, it has a positive intent. It's a message. You don't have to cut it off. If you do cut it off, you'll make yourself very, very sick. You become emotionally illiterate, and then you're vulnerable to narcissistic abuse. Because if I do something shitty to you, you should feel bad and feel angry and then say, hey, mate, I'm not putting up with that. But you don't. I do something shitty to you and you freeze and then you re-establish what it meant and you tell yourself a new story so you feel okay about it. That's emotional illiteracy. So become emotionally regulated. There's a superego issue that we all have to deal with. You have a voice running inside of your head. It's not really your authentic voice. It's the voice of people who've abused you, not person, people, plural. There's legion running inside of your head. It's called superego injunctions. So we internalize the voices of other people who've abused us, and then we keep playing those recordings. That starts to replace your conscience. You have a conscience. Some of you have a conscience that's to different degrees being colonized. It's a colonized conscience. So some of the messages that you're giving yourself, they're not good messages. They're not leading you in positive directions. Would you all largely agree with that? Okay. So that's work that has to be done. The third thing I would strongly advocate for is rewrite your moral code. This culture will not give you a moral philosophy. It will take your moral philosophy from you. It doesn't want you moral. It wants you pliant. It wants you not immoral, well, sometimes immoral, often amoral. It wants you amoral, because amoral people consume more. They buy more. This ship is sinking. It's absolutely sinking. And on the way down, they're going to try and take as much money from you as they can. Energy prices are going up by how much? 80%. 0%. The ship is sinking, and they're taking as much as they fucking can, as quickly as they can. 80% before December. Yay! It's time to rise up. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So develop a moral code so that you have a very, very strong sense for yourself of what is right and what is wrong, and then practice it. You have to develop that muscle. Just because somebody's pretty doesn't mean you should let them step on your boundaries. Just because somebody offers you an opportunity or there's something that they seem to be promising you doesn't mean you should forego your own moral code. These are the things I would strongly advocate for, those three things, to bring back your emotional regulation, to clarify your moral philosophy so that you will say no in the future. I will take a question from you, madam. Go.
I'm just going to contradict or try and contradict.
How dare you? Out, go on.
Do you think that necessarily narcissists target consciously or unconsciously weaker people, or do you think that they see it as a challenge to target someone who actually has a very firm, solid identity and moral code?
Well, let's go backwards in your question. What do you mean by consciously or unconsciously?
Well, I don't think they're always conscious of their behaviour, kind of based on what you were saying, that it's sort of so embedded in their psychology that. And certainly the narcissist that I got involved with, he would almost expose his own behaviour without knowing. He would confess to things, and I'd be like,
leakage.
Yeah, did you just hear what you just said? And for him, it didn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. I've got you on this recording. Yes, I did say that, but that's not what it means.
Not what I meant, exactly.
It is what it means. Well, it is what it means, but I only said it because you forced me to say it.
It's your fault.
Yes, I'm good at these games.
When I eventually met the inevitable discard, which subconsciously I always saw coming, I could always smell it in the air, I always knew it was coming. He said to me that I think I was sent into your life to break you. That's what he said to me. So I felt like
Sexy.
I felt like
Give me his number.
Targeted specifically because he saw that I was so sure of who I was and that I was, not at all codependent.
Yeah.
So just what you said, I mean, that they have a.
What I'm hearing you say is that you were very strong and not at all codependent.
I was I will take that back. I was codependent in the sense that I had a saviour complex. I thought that I was the person who could save him. And compassion saves everybody. Fucking doesn't.
Yeah. So were you targeted as a strong, independent, sovereign woman, or were you targeted as a codependent?
I was targeted as someone who, I mean, not to make it all about me, my personal story, but I was, I'm from Pakistan and Muslim, so he, and I'm a liberal Muslim, I'm not a practicing Muslim, so he kind of enforced, he took the spiritual route in, he kind of went in through that little schism that he found, that little crack he found. So I think that I was targeted because I was not the personification of what a Muslim woman should be. I was the slightly anomalous, so he came and eventually tried to pigeonhole me into that Muslim bracket, and I was like, no.
He just wanted to get the hijab back on you.
Absolutely he did, yeah. That's what he's trying to do.
And what's wrong with that?
Absolutely. Exactly.
We had this conversation last time, didn't we, sir? We should remember God. God doesn't live in a hijab, though, does he? What's your question?
My question is that I don't think that they all necessarily target weak-minded people. I don't think they have an instinct only for weak people. I think sometimes they see it as a challenge to their superiority and grandiosity. Sure,
but there's a tiny contradiction in your question. Did he target you because you are sovereign and independent, or did he target you because you're codependent?
I don't know the answer to that.
No. You have a saviour complex.
He mercifully killed it for me.
Okay. So at the moment, you would say you would not be subject to manipulation.
I used to think the world was a safe place before until I met this man. And
You're massively codependent then.
in the sense that, I had that desensitization of, rapists and killers and war. I mean, it's horrible. But then when I was confronted with one and I looked someone eye to eye, I was suddenly like, oh shit, it's actually terrifying to be confronted with something that evil. So in a way, it was I was glad for the very disgusting way in which he taught me the lessons that he taught me, but I was glad for them because it shook me and woke me up
Yeah.
out of this lull of, now I think back and I think,
Would you say he was sent by God? I'm an asshole. What do you want from me?
I was thinking esoteric about it, but I think there is a weird sense of good and evil. Certainly, that's the way that I was able to rationalize it. I had to believe that there was a certain inevitability to our union.
So you ceased to be a moral relativist and you became a moral absolutist who believed in good and evil again. I'm teasing you, but with therapy, sometimes I feel like that sort of philosophical, borderline religious discourse is probably more powerful than the psychological stuff.
Yeah.
Their realm is kind of the realm of psychology. Postmodernism, moral relativism, what I believe is this, what you believe that, everything is a mush of a da-ba-da-ba, and there's no boundaries with anything. Serious, sincere question, did it make you more religious in any way?
Yes.
What ways?
It made me surrender and let go of my need to control.
Mm-hmm.
It made me realize that I have a capacity for pain and a tolerance for pain way beyond what I thought I had. And it made me submit. It made me submit my will to a higher order because I saw that, there is so much injustice in the world. Suddenly when I was receiving it, I was like, oh, the whole world is shit. No, there's always been injustice in the world. It just suddenly feels a lot worse when it's happening to you.
Right.
So I suddenly saw my own...
And there's a narcissism in that, right? Yeah. When it happens to others, it doesn't hurt, so why?
Exactly. So it humbled me. It humbled me.
It sounds like it made you a better Muslim.
I wouldn't say I'm...
You're talking in completely Islamic terms, though. It humbled you. You learned to submit. You relinquished control.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I guess in the traditional sense of...
In the traditional sense. The reason I point that out is just because I don't do religious therapy, but I find it easier to do therapy with religious people, even if they're not anymore. If you were raised in a faith, it's almost like I see it as being like the hard drive. It's beyond the software. That's where everything really is. And there are things that happened through the Islamic way of being that were abusive that you really, really didn't like, that you really, really rejected. But now as an adult, to be able to come back and parse it and say, well, hang on, what is the value here? There's obviously something here because this experience happened and it led you to these conclusions, which you seem not to be aware are completely Islamic, but to everybody listening to you, like, yeah, that sounds like, submitting, becoming humbled, and realizing that, yes, there is good and evil in the world, and that we need to have a concept of good and evil, and we have to have boundaries, because beyond the submission, there are then boundaries. I mean, I'm not Muslim, well, can't not be Muslim, but okay, that's the essence of it, right? This is the world we live in. This is the nature of reality. Now here are some boundaries. And it sounds like what you've experienced. It's interesting as an example because beyond the moral philosophy and beyond the emotional re-regulation, I actually think at the final stage of the therapeutic process, you have to have a religious, spiritual something to conceptualize this. I don't really mind that much what it is. I was raised Christian. I lived in Muslim countries. These are the religions I understand. Buddhism. A sense of where this places you in the story of who you are as a human being is essential. What is the nature of reality? Why am I here? Why did this even happen? All trauma has to be filtered this way ultimately. Like, is there a God? If God is good, is he almighty? If God is good and almighty, why is there pain? Is God pain? Is God genocide? Is he there when people are being raped? Is that God who's doing that? No, it's not. Who is it then? These are hard questions. I don't have the answers, but to wrestle with them and to spend time with them, I think makes us stronger people with greater depth. Then when somebody comes along who's handsome and charming, as this man was, and slick, a good talker, they'll bounce off you because you'll be like, dude, I'm not on that level anymore. I'm on like a different level here. Let's wrestle with the nature of God. He'll shit himself and go, look, I can't do that because he's a liar. He's a deceiver. He's shaitan. Next question. Go on. You look so happy.
Yeah, I would just like to ask you about this concept that you believe in, that you need this spiritual thing. I'm a free will illusionist, so I don't believe in that.
You're a free will illusionist?
Yeah, no, I don't believe in free will. So I don't believe in God.
Oh, okay,
And I
okay.
was brought up religiously.
I thought, I was thinking of you as an illusionist, like a stage performer. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep very well last night. A free will illusionist, gotcha.
Yeah, and so I've sort of gone all through everything you're saying, I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yeah.
But it was that whole thing of the religion, was idolising a god, that I started to question that, which then I would idolise a person, which I found was a narcissistic way. I'd start idolising them instead.
Yeah,
So when I
it's
got
your
rid of
filthy
that-
kuffar atheism that's led you to these bad places.
Pardon?
Go on, sorry.
Can you just say that again, please?
Yeah, it's the lack of God that's the problem.
No, because I started off with God.
Yeah.
I had a very happy childhood.
Yeah.
In a certain way.
So how did you take people as God if you had God?
No, I started idolising them. In other words,
That's-
they became my
You shall have no idols before God.
No, he was my idol.
That's
And
right,
then I
that's
started
what you're
to
saying, the
idolise-
same thing that I'm
idolise
saying.
People as well.
You're just putting the word no in front of it. you're still idolising a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're going to fulfil me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I've been watching Sam's Backlin's, things on nothingness.
Yeah.
Which really helped me with my Buddhist concept. The more I take out of myself, that the world is put inside of me,
Yeah.
what they say I am in society and our culture, the more I realise that I'm just like an organism, biological, and that's why we suffer on a scientific thing. But that you don't put the suffering on top of it. In other words, I've just become more humble and kind, realising that there is no God, there is no nothing. I don't have to have all this thing to control me to make me feel a good person. So I just wondered if you'd gone down that route, because sometimes I listen to you and Sam, and I think, especially when you go on about the biological robot and things like that, that maybe that's the pathway that you're going down after a few years of listening to you both. I've seen you go on a journey in this nothingness, sort of like,
Yeah.
with no God attached to it. It seems.
Yeah. That's the journey that you think you're hearing is a little bit of flim-flam. That stuff of the biological machines and no God, that's I was in my teenage years. That was me on acid. It was like biological machines and there is no God. Listen, I'm not saying there is a God. I couldn't possibly know. He's here, he's calling. How fucking dare you? I'm listening to every word. Beautiful song. What was I saying? God. Yeah, I couldn't possibly know. When I'm talking about God these days, it's from, I read The Brothers Karamazov last year and it left a big impression on me.
What was it called,
Sorry?
What was it called?
The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I read it just so I can tell people in seminars I read it because it's incredibly impressive. It's a huge fucking Russian book. It's actually pretty good. It's not that hard to read. I thought it'd be tough. It's just very, very long. The problem is, as I said earlier, and I mentioned the biological element of it, we may be biologically religious creatures. We may really have no choice as far as God goes. I have seen no evidence at all that the atheist worldview is good for culture. You personally, that may work for you. There could be an intelligence level. I don't know what the issue is, but atheism, we're living in post-Enlightenment, Western, mechanistic atheism now. And this is shit. We have created a hell on earth. And this could be heaven. This could be Edenic. We have everything we need, and we have poisoned ourselves to the point where everybody's depressed and angry through consumerism. Go ahead, madam.
But do you really think that's because of atheism? I see it more as because of, look at America with the right wing, and they believe in this God that, that homosexuality is wrong, this is wrong. But it's all been based on this horrible religious thing. For me, if you took that away and that people were all equal, there is no God, there is no her God, their God, their God. I just feel that I've become a much better person.
I understand. Yeah, I understand the reasoning. It's Sam Harris's reasoning.
Yeah, I love Sam Harris.
You love Sam Harris. I knew you were a decadent. Of the new atheist movement, Sam Harris is not my cup of tea, but I like Christopher Hitchens very, very much. So I understand like the perspective just through observation of human beings and the way culture's going. Though I cannot see evidence that in a totally atheistic society, morality spontaneously blossoms. It clearly doesn't. It clearly doesn't. Listen, I'm not a repressive, religious type person. I don't want anybody to be hurt. But that to me is that's not religion, that's dogma. That's taking power in the name of, which is, it's wrong. It's written in the books that it's wrong. We know it's wrong. So people say, oh, I'm gonna beat you because of this. Well, I say I'm gonna beat this girl in front of me because she's committed a sin against some God. Okay. Did I make her? No. Do I know how she was made? No. Do I know how I exist? No. Some other force beyond me and beyond her called us into being and could cease to make us be in a moment. It's not that we would cease to be, we would cease to ever have been. I can't get there without religion. That level of thinking, that level of reverence to be able to say, I don't have the right. I don't have the right to hurt her. If she exists like this, the religious part of my brain says that's God's will. So why, unless she's about to murder some people, which nobody would contend that. Nobody would go on.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I've come to that
Yeah.
without that, the God part.
Yeah.
Because the God part was always stopping me.
Yes.
It was. I remember reading about Mary Bell, the childcare a long time ago, and they said in the book that when they put their hand, her hand on God on the Bible, Mary Bell wasn't even brought up with a concept of God, religion or whatever. So it's sort of like God and not God. It's like, why do we need this big thing in us to make us okay?
You and Sam Harris would be good mates. Sorry, your hand up when it first go.
Thank you. I mean, to be honest, I didn't grow up with faith. I became a Christian when I was 35. And I have respect and reverence for all faiths, generally. It's as long as, people are respectful and care about the community and hold it lightly. But it did give me a structure, it did give me boundaries, it gave me good people that was surrounding me and a community at a time where I wasn't socially intelligent.
Do you have a question, madam?
Sorry, yeah. Do you think that...
Never. I just leave it empty up there. It's better.
Do you think that where people haven't got faith, a insidious ideological disease is taking effect of people's minds?
Yes, that's not my idea. That's Nietzsche and Dostoevsky from 1888. They both came to the same conclusion inside of 3 years of each other. If there isn't God there, something else creeps in and it's narcissistic. We put us there. That's the Enlightenment, pure reason, like with pure reason and no faith, we become moral. It just doesn't seem to work. And I'm not, I can defend this in purely psychological Western terms. Humans, so a slightly separate point. Human sexuality, in order to function, requires fetishes. Fetishes are intrinsic to human sexuality. What this means is, it was actually what Zizek was talking about when he was in here. He famously says, so you have a man and woman in a room having sex. There's never just two people in a room having sex. There must be a third element. There has to be a fantasy. There has to be fantasy there as well. I'm going to speak in medical terms, otherwise orgasm won't be achieved. Freud, not known for being a progressive man, said, perversion is so universal in human sexuality, we shouldn't consider it perversion. Perversion by his times was not the same as what we consider perversion today, just to be clear. The point is there's always a third element. Perhaps, in order to function, we need the other element. Perhaps, so for me to wake up and not be an asshole, which I will, because why not? Fuck you, you're not me. Like, and I suffer, I'm in pain, why shouldn't I hurt you? I need to remember, I have to think in religious terms. Maybe that's just me, maybe I'm weak, I don't know, but I think most people do. When I go out in the streets, that's what I see. To remind myself, I didn't make you. Yes, you're annoying me because I'm in traffic and you're in my way and you have a stupid face or whatever the fucking uncharitable thought is happening. I suffer when I think like that. When I think in mechanistic Western biological terms, I suffer more. When I think in religious terms, I have gratitude for the fact that I'm alive and I'm just breathing and I'm here and I'm present and I can do this and I can talk to you guys and we can have this conversation. Wow, that's amazing. Reverence comes back in, gratitude comes back in, awe comes back in, and I'm psychologically better. I suffer less. I'm now not suffering again. I'll go back to being an asshole because I'll forget. There was a hand that went up. Yes, sir.
So, like, kind of to both your points, there's a difference between something being true and something being useful. And
Are you making that sounds like a Sam Harris point as well.
and one of the things is, I think, is in terms of atheism may be true, but as a society and as a culture, we need an organizing function of some kind.
Yes.
So, a belief in a higher power of some kind, is that just a useful organizing function because it doesn't feel arbitrary? Whereas if you look at wokeism, deconstructionism, and all that kind of stuff, what they proved out was the degree of arbitrariness in how society is structured. So a sense of God then says this isn't arbitrary because it's accepted as true.
Yes. Yes. Except there is mystery, which is I don't know how you are. I don't know how I came to be, and I don't know what the purpose is. The chances of us being here and not just be turning into cornflakes or deteriorating is monumentally fucking minuscule. Giraffes, mountains, the Spice Girls, and this seminar. Very fucking unlikely events in the universe. Extraordinary. So, yeah.
That's part of what's useful about it, because it kind of the belief set proves itself in terms of it's so unlikely that it's kind of like saying it's so unlikely. The fact that it is makes that belief system. It is definitely, it has a utilitarian element to it, but I don't think the utilitarianism describes all of what it's there for. But I wouldn't argue with you, because if we agree that no matter what religion you have, having a religion is useful.
Having a religion is certainly useful. Organizing principles that move beyond the corporeal, the mechanical. You know, we're talking about narcissistic abuse. If it's described purely in psychological terms, I can take you to a certain place therapeutically, and then it stops. Because I want to tell you to pray. And I can't. I can't say pray. And what would be the justification in saying to somebody, you'll probably feel better if you pray, you know. You'll probably feel better at this point if you confess. Literal confession. You sinned. You lost it. You were lazy. You were prideful. You didn't listen. You were not humble. And now you're here. And now you suffer. Confess. And confess the sin. There's a humility in saying, what are we really doing? I fucked up. Who are you going to say that to? The member of the community, I don't know, the imam, the priest, or whoever. Or maybe just to yourself or your therapist. Confession, forgiveness. I fucked up. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. I lost my way. I lost my faith, whatever it is. We've always had it, and it's always worked. And it's only in the last 200 years that we've gone, we don't need that. No, maybe we do. Maybe we do. Bless you. Alhamdulillah.
Feeling is healing.
Yes, madam.
Hey, I missed most of it. So
Yeah, it's actually a lecture on faith. I don't know if you...
Yeah.
It's your fault. It's your
Actually, what I wanted to know, and the reason why I came is your approach to egoism. And the thing I managed to catch is the self-eradication.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a link with masochism? And how do you connect the points? Because I feel it's more about masochism than self-eradication, and that we find pleasure at being abuse in some ways?
I think it's a relevant point. So if I wanted to answer your question, what I would say is that it's maybe it is a logical fallacy. If it is, I'm not aware of it. We seek order as human beings. So I've sought order in this echo narcissism thing. What did I do? I used another model, because that's what humans do. We use old models to build new maps. So I use the yin-yang from Taoism, which is going to have holes in it, because, of course, why do we choose two? I think we choose yin-yang because we have two hands and two eyes and two halves of our body. Why do we have two political parties? Because we biologically, incidentally, we have two hands. I think what you've done is you've gone, here's toxic yin, here's toxic yang. Toxic yang is sadistic, toxic yin is masochistic. Why? Because sadism does to the other and masochism receives. Yes. So, yes, 70% yes, but let's be careful. Let's be careful layering these models on top of each other. Codependence can be sadistic. Narcissists can be masochistic. Pleasure, there's very rarely a masochist who doesn't have sadistic tendencies, and vice versa. These are all, once you've started drawing pleasure from sensuality, you're probably going to try it both ways, and you're going to get addicted to it in both ways. But yeah, I think masochism is an important part, but I wouldn't layer it directly on.
How do you help if you use this approach? How is this the masochism approach a good one to start?
Not for me. Not for me. That's why I haven't prioritized it. I'm aware of it. It's there in my head. I don't talk about it because people I try not to use the word fetish, because people instantly go, ooh, sexual fetish, which of course originally it's not. It's a fetish would be how you describe something a shaman uses in a ritual. It's something that's imbued with power that it doesn't have. And then now we think sexual fetish, like I have a sexual fetish for Costa coffee cups. I'm imbuing a non-sexual object with libidinous magical energy to make it sexual. So sadism and masochism I generally don't talk about because the sexual connotation that I would have to then wade through and be like, no, you know. And also I genuinely, where are you from?
French, Algerian.
France. You French, you're obsessed with sadism and masochism. No, it's a very, you know, it's a French, it's a French perspective, right?
Say again. Yes.
It's a French, and sadism and masochism is from France. You know, when people say like, oh, you're in destructive relationships that hurt you, you must be a masochist. In my humble opinion, I find that a cheap. It's right, but it's not. It's misleading. You know, you're enjoying the pain. Really? I'm not sure. Is there pleasure in pain? Yes. Is there repetition compulsion? Yes. But I would rather talk in the terms of repetition compulsion than masochism, if that makes sense. I like it, but it's not quite right for me. So I wouldn't use it as a model. There was a hand that went up on this side. Yes?
Okay, when we leave here, and...
You're not leaving.
Okay, other than going to a therapist for 50 minutes once a week, what would you recommend for getting healthier after narcissistic abuse?
Well, I just released a course. It's honestly like I released the course 5 days ago. It took me 10 months to put it together. Narcissistic abuse and the recovery from narcissistic abuse is heavy work. And I would claim now that you just won't be the same person afterwards. It uproots everything. It completely revives everything, which is why it's worth talking in spiritual and religious terms, because your whole map of reality shifts. Somebody has leveraged love to imprison and torture you. We know that there are robbers. We know that there are psychopaths who go around killing people. We generally don't talk that much about that. And even though everybody is saying narcissism, we still very rarely represent it in films. Your love, your goodness, your conscience, your compassion, your drive to be loved, to help somebody was the hook that killed you. What was it? The line in The Green Mile where he says they kill them with their love. They kill them with their love. It's horrifying. It's the most horrifying. I think it's probably one of the most horrifying things imaginable. So it's very, very hard work. So I'm not going to stand here and say, oh, do some tapping or some chanting, or like, it's not going to do it. It's not going to do it. It's the attachments you formed with your mother at that age. That's what's being hacked. Have you heard the Sam Backman dual mothership idea?
Yeah.
He becomes your mother. You become his mother. Wow, we're playing with some very, very deep stuff.
From it? Do you spend years still suffering afterwards?
I have a process for doing it, but like I say, it took 10 months to develop, and to go through that course, you have to have a therapist, and 3 months minimum. If you were super disciplined and did the work every day, it's 3 months minimum. And really, for you to fully shake that off, you're looking at a year. You're looking at a year. And that's if you're lucky. Most people don't. Most people never break this thing called the shared fantasy. And so the shared fantasy lives on in them. It's like an arrow hit them. We took the arrow out, but a big chunk just stayed inside and festered. And it now won't come out. It's hard work. I can't give you a cosmetic answer. Yes, madam.
In that case, are you presenting, especially with the concept of narcissism you were saying earlier, is it possible for someone with a narcissistic personality disorder or BPD to really either come out of disillusionment, or are they always presented in their own reality or fantasy of illusion?
If they were given to me and they signed away their human rights and I could imprison them for a few years, then yes, I could possibly get them out of the illusion, but it would be illegal and it would hurt them. I'd have to re-traumatize them. I'd have to infantilize them, trauma bond them to me, break them to the point where they were a child again, and have them accept me as a parent, and then take them back through childhood.
So going back into the egg, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then breaking them.
Yeah. In my opinion, the experience has to be very, very intense and very immersive. It's CPTSD, which is rooted in immersively traumatic experiences. It's never going to work through group therapy, talk therapy. They go and do ayahuasca one weekend. Come on, like, hand them over and sign away their human rights, maybe. But I don't know. I've never done it. I only have a theory. And at the end of all that, they may just modify their behaviours so that they can escape. I'm better now. And then I let them go, and then they come and find you and ruin your life. I'm not hopeful. I'm really, really not very hopeful. I can take one more question, and then we should wrap up. Yes, madam?
I was just wondering how long we should spend, I know you can't give a fixed answer, but going into this type of content and the psychology and the sandbagging, because basically my approach to it was, if I learn every single thing I can about this topic, then, it's not going to overcome me or whatever, but then I'm just this kind of strange person consuming this content all day, and it's actually quite isolating. People are probably around me like, why aren't you just doing your real life and just getting along with it in a way? So yeah, it's just like, is there ever time when you need to leave this type of content alone? Because I don't know, I've just kind of become always consuming this type of content online.
Ask the question again. How would you ask it?
It's just like, should we put limits on how far we're going in, like spending with psychology, learning about this?
Yes.
Because it's kind of, you're still living with the effects of.
Yes, you should just do therapy and don't consume online content related to narcissism. It's about other people. It's going to do you no good. It's going to make you feel better, but nobody's healed that way. Never. I've watched people do it for years and they don't heal.
But even people that you think are good, like say Sam Backman and stuff, is
watching his videos will do nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Watching my videos does nothing. Did you get better watching my videos? No, you felt better. You didn't get better.
I felt like comforted.
Yes.
If someone gets it.
Yeah, you can be comforted. So I would permit you 3 weeks of comfort, but you have to do the work. You have to get in there. Otherwise, you're an addict and you're a cult follower. I have to fight to stop this from becoming a cult of personality, because, so it's the mother-father issue. They've been abused effectively by a mother or father, so then they want a new one. Okay, and now what? Now you've taken your umbilical cord, you unplugged it from them and you plugged it into me. That's good. It'll make me very rich, but it won't be very good for you guys. Gentlemen at the back, do any of you have questions? No? No? There's not been enough man questions. No? A man question from the Isle of Dogs. Go ahead.
I think I was going to ask you, like, you know, we have this obsession, this analysis paralysis, and we're watching all the videos, and we're learning all about these things. Do you think it's valuable to realize that I don't know how to frame it, but we were kind of losers in a certain way because we had this perception of ourselves. So, because we tend to think, oh, that person was a prick and she abused me, and I was the good person. Is it valuable to say, actually, you know what, I think I was a twat. I think, you know, it's tough love, yeah. It's like we have to admit it and say, I got exploited because, maybe I was gullible, maybe I was stupid.
I don't think you should call yourself a twat. You should let me do that.
So, do you think there's value in that? And then
there's absolutely value in humbling yourself and saying, I fucked up, because you did. There was, and again, maybe it will put some people off when they watch this on YouTube. I think it's valuable putting it in religious terms. You were tempted. There was a path. You know what the path is. We all fucking know what the path is, and you got tempted off it. Who did it? How did they do it? The way that they've always done it, the way that it's described in all religious texts everywhere. Somebody tempted you with something, and then you signed a contract. You took the bait, you signed a contract, and you entered a shared fantasy, and that shared fantasy ate your soul. That's what actually really happened. Fight it, play around with it, or it didn't really, I was in control, fucking hell, man. Like, okay, cool. You're just hiding from the truth, and that's going to leave you very, very sick. Very, very sick. The truth is, because I use the old school terminology, I'll say people are victims of narcissistic abuse. And every once in a while, some conscientious person will send me an email and go, I don't think you should call people that. I'm like, well, what are they then? They're not victims. They weren't victimized. They were victimized. They were victimized as surely as if they got fucking robbed in the street. You wouldn't give somebody that much love and time. Think about what you've given. You won't feel very comfortable if you do. You've given more than money. You've given more. You've given parts of yourself. You'll never get them back. You'll never get them back. And trying to give those parts of yourself again to another person in the future is going to be a fucking therapy job. You'll probably have to both go to therapy together because now you've got counter-dependency, hypervigilance, bibbidi-babbidi-boo. You know, it's incredibly costly. It's evil. Evil is evil. Let's call it for what it is. It's evil, and it costs the victims in a way that is hard to measure. You can't just talk about time. You can't just talk about money. It's emotion. It's parts of people's soul that they then have to fight to get back. So yeah, but no, you shouldn't call yourself a twat. just send me a message and I'll call you a twat. I don't mind doing that. Did you? You said you're from Pakistan. My father's from Pakistan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
He was born in Pakistan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Rawalpindi.
Oh, my mother too.
Was from Rawalpindi.
Yeah.
Every time I meet someone from Pakistan, I say that because 30% of the time they'll say, you don't look. you wanted to, right? You're like, no.
If you were from Kashmir, I'd probably pass you off.
Maybe. No, he was, his father was extremely white, an Irishman. They were in the British Raj. So when it was still India, when we were colonizing it and stealing and stuff. Well, it's part of my culture. Theft is part of my culture, and you'll have to respect that. Right? Oh, shit. Okay, we'll cut there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. It's not the most convenient time, I know, on a Saturday morning in London. And it's a hard subject, and you did very, very well. So, well done. Thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Cheers. Bravo.